earning $100,000 per acre farming and direct marketing organic vegetables. Almost unbelievable, but entirely true, and Robert Wegener of Wegener Farms is here to tell us all about it, including how he started in 2020 and grew exponentially over the past 5 years. He's going to break down his unique business model that allows him to serve 156 customers off of a single acre every single week without a farmer's market, how he organizes his systems to produce 60,000 pounds worth of produce off of a single acre in the space of a year, and more. Specific topics are time-stamped down below, and for a printable cheat sheet featuring the top 10 takeaways from today's conversation, click on the first link in the description of this video, and I'll email it directly to you. So we're going to be talking about how Rob and his family work with 1.5 acres, produce roughly 60,000 pounds worth of produce, and serve 156 CSA customers. Rob, give us a little bit of an idea of where in the world you are at.
Okay, so our farm is in Fenton, Michigan. One of the kind of cool things about where we are, we're on one of the only hills you'll find in the area, which creates an interesting little microclimate. So even though we're in the middle of Michigan, we're really zone 6B here, and we're able to stretch things a little bit more than you would be able to if you're just a mile in any direction from here. Wow. We're primarily an organic vegetable farm, so we got our USDA certification about 3 years ago, but we also have right now about 270 laying hens, and we'll have, by the time we grow the flock in the summertime, nearly 500 hens that serve our CSA customers. We also raise broilers, and we'll do some turkeys this year for the first time. And if I can learn enough from the shepherdess, maybe we'll do some lambs.
That sounds like a good plan. All right, so let's go ahead and start. I'm going to ask you the first question of the night. Rob, when did you start your farm? When did you launch into this?
So we bought the farm in 2020 and did our first CSA with 10 friends who couldn't say no. So we cornered them and had our first season in 2021, really with the objective of just sorting out, could we actually grow something? And now we're 5 years later. Last year, in year 4, we had 120 shares that represented about 156 different families because some of them are half shares. We also serve a few hundred families to the farmers market in our farm stand, which is actually, I call it my vegetable vending machine here at the end of my driveway. So it's an amazing to see the traffic that gets generated by just that farm stand at the end of the road. So pretty astronomical growth for the first few years. And this year we'll actually try and dial it back a little bit, because I think we were a little too far over our skis in terms of our systems last year. We need to get a few things dialed in to make the farm more efficient and really profitable enough to be sustainable.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned you're at about 156 CSA customers right now. Is that the right number?
Yes, correct.
Are you looking to expand past that 1.5 acres?
Actually, I'd like to get smaller. So if there's anyone who's familiar with Connor Crickmore and his Never Sink Farm in upstate New York, I mean, this guy, he started about the same size we are. And actually is farming now less than 1 acre and generating about 4 times the revenue that we are on our 1.5 acres on a farm that's much smaller. So a lot of this market garden thing is about systems and efficiency and intensity. How quickly can you turn and how much are you using the land? So I don't foresee us getting bigger than 1.5 for the vegetables. I would love to have some more space for animals. As I mentioned before, I'd love to do some sheep, but that would mean another piece of property to do that on.
Right. And is 1.5 acres your total land base right now?
Yes. And it's about 10,000 square feet of it is under plastic. You can see one of our cat tunnels there.
Yeah. We're going to go ahead and dive into the business model itself, because people are already asking in the comment section, what is a CSA? So really break that down, that sales model down.
Oh, man. Okay. So I'm going to have some enthusiasm about this. We love the model, first of all, because of the first letter, C, stands for community. CSA is community supported agriculture. The model was really born of the need to match farm income or revenue with farm expense. So these subscriptions, which is basically what they are, customers pay for them at the beginning of the season. So I, as a farmer, have the money that I need, the capital I need to actually run the farm at the beginning of the season, and my customers then get fresh vegetables and eggs through the course of our growing season. The really cool thing about it is that it really does develop community, and people
Mhm.
get to know each other at the pickup points, and you'll see folks start to exchange things like canned goods and recipes, and which just builds a sense of wanting to always be there, and it brings people back year
Mhm.
after year.
That's so neat. Now, the community supported agriculture, how frequently do they get a share?
So we have 4 products, 2 of which are full shares, so they get a share every week. And the other 2 are half shares, so they get a share every other week. And what that allows me to do is offer a less expensive product, but still keep production even, because I can stagger the weeks. So 2 half shares really looks like a full share in terms of the farm plan, the production plan.
You alluded to it a little bit earlier, but why did you opt for the CSA model over just taking a boatload of goods to your local farmers market every week?
Well, number one, it's really predictable, obviously, because you know at the beginning of the season what you need to grow. And if you saw what our production plan looks like, I tell people it's like writing a symphony for 50
Yeah.
different instruments, right? Because we grow 50 different kinds of vegetables. And knowing when the seeds go in, when they get transplanted, when they get picked, when they get boxed. If you understand what your shares look like going in, you also understand what you need to grow and when it needs to come off. And we do grow extra, of course, for farmers markets and the farm stand, but we sell basically what we have left there. It also creates a really good way to grow things that are interesting for the farmer that you probably couldn't sell at the market, but you
Yeah.
can put them in a box and tell people what to do with them by giving them a recipe and giving them kind of the background of what it is. And it creates interest while at the same time, you're not just growing carrots and potatoes and
Right.
lettuce as a farmer.
Right. All right. So you're talking production, planning, and sort of stacking all this organizational infrastructure. Did you have a background in farming before you jumped into this?
So yeah, so if you can picture this, at age 12, I was driving a white Ford 270, which I can't believe they let me do that. This was a giant tractor, right? My uncles were all farmers, and so I worked on the farm from probably age 12 to maybe 17. But the real tragedy is that those uncles really didn't find a way to adjust
Mm.
to a changing world, I guess. The farms around them got bigger and more capital dense, and they just couldn't keep up being row crop farmers. So they never really shifted to a direct model, a higher margin model that they could survive on. And so I saw those farms kind of dwindle away and be sold. And also at that time, being a farmer wasn't something that was cool, right? I mean, you didn't
Right.
want to. It's what you did if you couldn't figure out how to do anything else, and
Mm.
it's really a shame, because now after 30 years in corporate America, I want to be a farmer. So I'm
Mhm.
leaving, a corporate job to come and do the thing that I started doing when I was 12.
And that's the neat thing about the CSA model. It's a direct to consumer model. And I interviewed, I don't know if you watched it, but it was Luke Gross. And he talked about how he started his CSA model exactly like you did with the vegetables, and then was able to scale it both income wise and just customer wise, because he was able to add in meat as an afterthought and just continued building. But he already had the customer. That was the beauty of it. He already had
Right.
access to the customer. You mentioned being certified organic. What was that process like to become that? Did you start organic, or was that something that came with time?
No, we certified halfway through our second year. Yeah, halfway through our second year, and we thought a lot about it, right? Because it's not an easy process. It's particularly not an easy process if you're a market garden like ours. The organic certification process is not really built for
Mm.
high diversity cropping like we do. So it made it pretty challenging, but it
Mhm.
was well worth it. It really was.
Right.
The value of this certification in the marketplace is really huge. I still believe, as I did at the beginning, that the right thing is transparency. It's not the certification.
Mhm.
But to be honest, not everyone has time to come and tour the farm and see how we
Right.
do things. So the certification, getting it and keeping it, if anyone who's done it would, I think, say this, it's very intense in terms of documentation. We have to be able to demonstrate seed to sale on every plant, basically. So that one piece of lettuce you're eating in your salad, I need to know when the seed was planted and where it was grown, when it was picked, what was it fed, if we use any inputs. So in that respect, it's a lot of paperwork. The good news is that I'm fairly good with Excel, and I was able to develop some tools that help us a lot with that. And also, if anyone uses a tool like Slack, I'm going to tell you that's awesome for your crew to keep track of what they're doing when, and it creates a nice audit trail for the inspectors to go back and review.
It's really good. You're talking about a lot of different tech elements that are actually used in sort of the business or more the tech sphere, but you're transposing them into farming and making it sort of a successful situation. So somebody asked in the question section, pricing for your shares. Can you break down your pricing and whether or not you found that you do need to raise it and if the market can support that?
So we've raised it every year since we've started. And I've done some things like, for example, we have a founder's share, which is the people that started with us get a discount as a reward for their loyalty. But we've raised the price every year. Our program in 2025 will be 18 weeks long. For 18 weeks, for the vegetables and a dozen eggs per week is $845. If you pay with a check, you get a discount because I don't have to pay the interchange fees on the credit card and all the rest. So, and it's amazing how many people are willing to write a check if you give them $25 off off the price, which is nice. I mean, it's good for them, good for me. We have a half share product also with eggs that's about $430. And then we have also those same two options without eggs, which are a little less expensive. We spent a lot of money on marketing last year and a lot of effort. And this year we're 16% more expensive. And I'm doing a lot less marketing. And a lot of it is just because we've built the brand. And I think it's also just the level of demand in the marketplace for honest food,
Right. All right. That throws me into another question with the marketing. So just going back just a little bit, you found your initial customer base as a Friends deal. And then how did you scale it to the 156 past that?
Lots of social media, lots of word of mouth, and a few partnerships. So local businesses that are willing to help promote. But, the social media is a pretty powerful marketing engine.
Somebody asking in the comment section here, where'd you get your cat tunnel?
Farmer's Friend, best deal going. They're great tunnels. They're easy to put together. And if you have the time, it's even better if you buy them without the hardware and buy the hardware locally, but they'll ship you the whole kit on a pallet. It's got everything you need to put the tunnel up. They're pretty awesome. We do have two big high tunnels. These are a little bit more high tech. There are lots of automation in them, and they're much bigger. Like they're 120 by 32, so they're pretty sizable structures. Those came from a place called Nifty Hoops, which is a local place here. I had them build the high tunnels. I built the cat tunnels, but I had Nifty Hoops build the high tunnels.
Somebody else asked, or what do your hen runs look like? I don't think I saw anything on the website for that.
Oh, yeah. So that's a little bit of a redneck engineering exercise. So one of them's a hay wagon that I put wire, I built a frame on the bottom and put wire in the bottom. And it looks like, like a little barn on a hay wagon so that we can move the hens. I use roll-out nesting boxes. They're definitely the way to go to keep the eggs clean. The other one was actually built on it's also a hay wagon, but it's like you'd see on the road, not pulled through a field. So it's a roadworthy wagon. So it's a little bit bigger. Same deal. And then we just have one that I had to buy on a whim because I just had too many chickens and not enough coop. That's one that the Amish build, which is on skids. So we can move them all and try and keep them on fresh grass and off their litter. We don't move them in the wintertime. We just keep putting basically hay mulch down to try and keep them fairly clean. And we use nipple waters, and we've kind of developed these feeders that we use out of big 55-gallon trash cans. We use their ports all around the outside of them so that they can put their head in and get the food without making too much of a mess. So, and we can load them up and they're good for a week, which is nice to not have to feed every night.
Right. Ariel has a good question here. She says she is curious to see how you plan plants to customer ratio is the question. Okay.
Well, that's a trade secret. I can't share that. No, so again, I have an Excel model, and because we have data that we've built up year over year, I know basically what the yield is per bed foot. So I know that if I'm going to plant a 100-foot bed of bok choy, I know how many pounds that'll yield because I know how many pounds it yielded the last time. There are other plants that are season-long plants, not something we pull and replant, like for example, eggplants or peppers. And this is just based on the experiences we've had in the past. We know how many to plant. When it comes to things like potatoes, I plant as many as I can find space for. And by the way, growing potatoes is really not something that you want to do if you're a market gardener. It's a total loser as a crop, but they are just so cool to grow. So we grow them every year. We grow purple ones and red ones and pink ones, and just because they're cool. And our customers love them. So
I was gonna say it's a big staple as far as your customers probably.
they're not worth the space. So
because they take so much space. Is that why?
They take space and time, and that's ground that you're going to grow basically one crop in that year. Whereas I can turn bok choy every 30 days, so I can grow one heck of a lot of bok choy in the same space.
I'm curious. This is a question from me. So you're talking data. What is your corporate job? If you don't mind me asking.
I'm a financial services executive. Yeah, with a MBA from the University of Michigan and an economics degree from a small liberal arts college. So I'm overeducated. Yeah, one of those guys.
Wow, that's pretty neat, though. Question that Carl says here, he has asked, how much are your basic memberships per customer on average?
For the CSA, so most of my customers will buy a full share with eggs. So if they pay by check, it's $800 for 18 weeks. This is the summer CSA.
Okay.
We also do a winter CSA, microgreens CSA, and we will do a fall CSA this year, which will be shorter. So it'll be like 4 weeks I haven't priced it yet, but probably $150. Again, because we have the data that we have, and we have a pretty comprehensive 3-year business plan that predicts cash flows based on, based on everything, based on the cost of inputs and the revenue we expect out of the CSA as well as the farmers market. We build that model to our financial goals and then work our way back. What we need to price things at to be able to actually achieve those financial goals.
100%. That's actually really encouraging to hear you say that, because that's what I did with my farm personally. And when I tell people that's what I did, worked backwards in that way, it just, some people are kind of like, how does that work? But that was actually really encouraging to hear from you.
Yeah. And then early on, when I was trying to sort out how to do this, Jam Forte was my first real contact of, holy cow, I can do this, right? So if you guys, the market gardener, he basically built a life for him and his family on 1.3 acres. And he talks about this, in a lot the same way. You got to decide start off with what your objectives are. How much money do you want to make? And you can work your way back into what you need to do to make that money. You do have to understand a little bit about your market, because if I were 50 miles north of here, I wouldn't get $820 for my CSA.
Right. What's your location like? What's your nearest metro?
So we have a really big, very affluent subdivision right next door, which helps a lot. The town of Fenton, which is also quite affluent, although not a huge town, maybe it's 100,000 people, is 5 miles in one direction. And the town of Brighton is extremely affluent, and it is probably 8 miles in the other direction. And we actually do pickup points in Brighton. We have a refrigerated trailer, which we take our produce to in Brighton. And then we also have a third town in Ortonville, which is actually a little tiny town, but it's got the most amazing farmers market. Everyone in the entire town comes to the farmers market, plus some people. So we do the same there, and we're able to get our prices, at that market as well.
Right. So you just broke down, it's about 843 for your 18-week CSA. This breaks down to just $45 a week. Do you have the data on just roughly average how much produce per week in pounds that the customer gets?
So the boxes are 3/4 bushel. So one thing I will say about our CSA that makes it a little bit different, we struggled at the beginning to come up with a way to build a product that would work for 2 to 6 people, families of 2 to 6. And this was our demographic. And we saw a lot of farmers try to attempt to do this by creating boxes that were different sizes. So
Mhm.
same frequency, but different size boxes, small, medium, large kind of thing. And that bothered me a lot because I didn't want people to be boxed in, so to speak, to what's in their box. I wanted them to be able to have a little more freedom to choose, but I also wanted to be able to start with a basic assortment in the box. So we
Mhm.
developed this sort of approach where customers get a base box and then there are a whole bunch of free choice items laid out. It's almost like a personal farmer's market where they're able to choose more of something that's already in their box or additional products. In some cases, they'll take something out of their box because they don't like it and put it down and pick something else up. It also allows us to do things like not put tomatoes in the box. You know, we grow 20 different kinds of heirloom tomatoes, and these things are pretty tender. I don't want to like have them jostled around in the
Mhm.
boxes. And my concern at first was, well, people will just, load up. They'll just take way more
Right.
than they should. It turns out they don't do that. So if
Mhm.
you tell people, look, take what you can use in a week, what you'll
Mhm.
find is the people that have a family of 6 will take enough for their family of
Oh,
6.
neat.
And the people that are a family of 2, they take enough for a family of 2. We stress a lot to our customers that this is a CSA. You are buying a share of the farm. So don't think of it like a shopping cart full of stuff that you got at Kroger. It's not that. It's
Mhm.
a share of
Mhm.
what the farm produces. So part of the farm is yours. And please take the part you can use.
Right.
Don't take more. And it works. And
That's
so
so neat.
we're able to service those customers in that range and do it and make everybody happy.
So what I'm hearing from you is that they're able to sort of pick and choose week to week what they need. Is that because you take that cooler and you just kind of lay it out before them at your various pickup spots?
Yes, yeah. So we only do 2. We're going to do 2 pickup spots in 2025. One at the farm, one in Brighton. So we set up folding tables, and we use bulb crates a lot here at the farm. So
Mhm.
our bulb crates, these black plastic crates, are laid out on the table with all the different vegetables in them. So they take their box, they can open their box, they look and see what's in it, and add from those crates the stuff that they want. And always the tomatoes are always separate because just like people would be able to choose their own tomatoes. Plus, they look cool. They're impressive.
Anna asks, do you give away product to start with in order to gain return customers?
So we haven't done that in terms of retail. I have done it for a couple of wholesale accounts that we have had. They've come and gone, but we had a couple of local stores, small boutique high-end stores that we sold stuff to. And the way to get the stores is to walk in with a basket full of very impressive looking vegetables, right? And
Mhm.
just leave them there for the manager. If you do that enough, your stuff is good enough, then they will buy it. The problem is that I don't like the margins because for me to get my margin, they've got to sell it at such a price that I think it's kind of
Mhm.
ridiculous to get their margin. And I would rather cut that out. Just take my margin and still sell it at a reasonable price. And no
Yeah.
matter where it's sold, our name is on it. So even though that might be being sold at Simply Fresh, the Wegener farm is in a big sign on the bottom of it. So I don't
Mhm.
want to be the guy who's selling you an $8 tomato. That's not a good look.
Right. Right. That's actually a good point. That's a very good point. So what size is your team to manage all of this? How many of you guys are working this?
So I had 8 people last year. I'm going to try and make it 4 this year
Mhm.
because one of them is going to be me. And I have a pretty
Mhm.
high level of confidence in myself to get the systems dialed in and also to, I think, motivate a team. I had a farm manager for the last 3 years. She was awesome. She was awesome. But she was also a 23-year-old kid, who wanted to be a farmer. She worked very hard, but her strength wasn't necessarily the people management side of things when it
Mhm.
came to holding people accountable and things like this, right? So we have a lot of fun. We're a great place to work. So if there's anyone out there who's looking for a summer job, just let me know. But we do work hard, and we have to crank through the work. Things have if you think about the intensity we're talking about on such a small footprint, if one bed goes fallow for a week, this is a big loss, right? And anybody who's done this thing, that somewhere around July, middle of July, the weeds start to grow daily, and you get behind. And pretty soon you're doing your farm walks, and 4 beds are fallow and 10 beds are fallow, and you start to you see the money that you're losing because you're just not getting those beds turned over. Right. And so that's where what I mentioned earlier about getting the systems up to speed, the ability to quickly turn those beds, get them productive again, is really key.
So let's talk about fertility. Where do you get your fertility from, given that you are all organic? How do you keep that ground producing so highly?
Tons of compost. We do use things like fish emulsion, blood meal, alfalfa meal, bone meal, and that's pretty much it. Our compost is not very high nitrogen, so most of the nitrogen comes from the blood meal or bone meal.
Do you import that, or is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'd love to make our own compost, but the problem is, and you'll experience this if you try to do the organic thing, to be able to use compost in an organic system, the compost itself has got to be made according to extremely stringent standards, including temperature measurements, and it's got to stay above a certain amount, 160 for 6 days or whatever it is. But it's a very involved process that you need almost to have some scale and some equipment to be able to do. And we just don't have it. So we buy the compost.
That makes a lot of sense on that 1.5 acres. This kind of falls in line with it, but how do you control pests and disease?
Yeah, so one of the things that you have to do as an organic grower, according to NOP, the National Organic Program, is you have to have something called an integrated pest management plan. And this is all about starting first with physical barrier and variety choice. So choosing resistant varieties, using netting, things of this nature. We do spray, but the sprays that we use are organic, which means they're natural. So things like pyganic, which is a extract of the chrysanthemum flower, believe it or not. And we use BT, which is a naturally occurring bacteria. And we do use some other things, like the slugs were just out of control last year. So we use a product called Sluggo, which is also natural and organic. And when that occurs, things like DE, diatomaceous earth. And we use some copper emulsion for tomato blight. And these things are all, it's part of your integrated pest management, disease management plan that gets submitted, approved, and then you're audited against it.
Got another question for you, Rob. It's in line with the last one, but what were some major hurdles in terms of those early, say that your first year, your first couple years, what was just really difficult for you in those initial startup years?
Oh man, I think it's the same thing that is now. It's just that month of July is just it's just insane. And once the weeds take over, if they do, they got us last year and they got us 2 years ago. The year in between, we managed to keep up. But when you're an organic farmer and you're farming, I mean, this land was not a farm when we moved here. It was grass basically, and we didn't take the time to do things like leave a tarp out there for a year to sort of sterilize the weed seeds and all the rest. So we do battle the weeds, and that really is the bane of my existence. It's the weeds.
What is your strategy? How have you developed strategy to keep them at bay?
Well, we've tried all kinds of things. We've done some no-till approaches in a few of the blocks, the field blocks we have, which sort of worked, but it created a really rough pH problem for us. I use a lot of landscape fabric. We plant through landscape fabric for anything that's in the field for a long time, like eggplants or peppers. Also, I really like Connor Crickmore's approach, which is basically disturb the soil, not very deep, but the top half inch of the soil, and just disturb it all the time. So have a program where you're basically cultivating every block once a week. The problem is you got to do it, right? You have to keep up with it. So it goes back to sort of the systems and the accountability of the staff to be able to actually get that done. If you miss a block for a week in July, you're really in trouble because the weeds will grow like a foot overnight, it seems like. So, and then you pay people to come and pull them. And there's nothing more depressing than watching somebody work for an entire day to pull weeds on, like on 3 beds.
Carl asks a question here. He says, do you stack crops such as corn with legumes, for example?
We rotate. So we would do some companion planting early in the year. When we open the high tunnels, we'll plant beets in the tomato beds and then plant the tomatoes down the middle. And what that does, first of all, it grows fantastic beets because the early beets are great. The greens look really good. And then we'll pull the beets and put landscape fabric over the top, to keep the weeds down. And then the tomatoes obviously grow. We trellis all the tomatoes on single leaders. So nothing could grow under those tomatoes once they got more than a couple of feet tall. But until then, the beets work really well. It also helps pay for the odd day here or there when we need to heat the greenhouse. We usually don't heat at all unless it's going to get below 28 degrees. Then we have to keep the plants alive with some heat. I have done companion planting with some things like marigolds to try and, again, keep pests down. I know people swear by onion, companion and things like that. But in terms of managing fertility and pests, we rotate. The farm is set up in blocks, and our rotation plan includes moving the different varieties around the farm in blocks, so that we'll do things like plant onions behind legumes, for example, to try and manage some of the fertility in those blocks ahead of the high feeders.
That was good. Another person asks something similar. It's in relation to the potatoes. Have you had any success interplanting or companion planting to make that crop more profitable?
No. That's a short answer. The last few years, the potato bugs have just been unbelievable. They're out of this world. They winter over in the ground. So in theory, you should be able to control them by moving the potatoes around and we used landscape fabric last year to try and keep the potato beetles somewhat down. But they're horrible. They're just horrible things. So potatoes are tough. And when I was driving that Ford 270 when I was 12 years old, it was on a potato farm. So this is kind of where my heart is. So
I see that. That makes sense.
I totally love growing them, but they're horrible to grow. It's an
abusive relationship.
Yeah, it's toxic for sure. They're definitely losers.
Mary asks, what do you feed your chickens?
They're on pasture, so they get to forage, which is nice. But we do feed them Kalmbach, all natural food, and I swear by it. I'll tell you, people drive 30 miles to get our eggs because they're just better. I don't know what else to say. Chickens being allowed to be chickens is part of it, but that Kalmbach food is really dynamite stuff.
A brand?
Yeah, it's a family. They're not huge, but regionally here they sell a lot.
How do you spell that?
Sure there's
somebody wants to look it up.
Kalmbach.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you probably can find similar formulations. They do things like put marigolds in the food, which makes the egg yolks really golden orange. They're almost like custardy. It's kind of hard to describe, but once you have these eggs, you'll never be able to eat eggs from the supermarket again. They're just so much better. So
that's so neat. All right, do you sell your eggs outside of the CSA? And if so, what do you charge per dozen?
We do. So we've been a little bit chasing the market, to be honest, this year. So at the beginning of the season, I was selling them for $4, and then we went to $5, and now we're at $6. We can't make enough. The girls are laying 20 dozen a day right now, and I can't. They're gone. If I put them down on our stand, they're gone in 5 minutes, literally. It's like people are waiting in the woods for them. So I have a few customers who are also CSA members that usually call me and ask to hold some back. Normally I don't make it to the stand because I have like a line of people waiting for today's production sort of thing.
HDC says, is wood ash good for the soil?
Sometimes. I can only tell you test your soil. test it, and test it every year, because
Yeah.
if you're serious about this stuff, you can see the changes with both the composition of your soil, which is some indication of what the biology in it is like, which is the important part, by the way, the biology in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also see things like what your compost might be doing to your pH or things like this, and you can make adjustments. And we test every year, and we especially test in the high tunnels where we use things like copper for the tomatoes, because this stuff can also residualize in the soil. We want to be very
Mm-hmm.
careful that we're treating the soil well. We've seen through those tests, since we've moved to the property, our organic matter's gone from 2% to 8.5% in some of these areas of the farm,
Wow.
which is due to how we manage. We're low till, which helps, but also the compost. I'm a big proponent of the fact that really in an organic system, you've got to feed the biology. The biology feeds the plants. So even though we do things like use blood meal or bone meal, we're not feeding the plants. We're feeding the soil biology. The soil biology is feeding the plants.
Exactly. David Reed asks here, what do you do with product that is left over after customers have selected what they want?
We don't have much left over, to be honest. Between the market and the CSA, we really usually don't have much. We will have some tomatoes that get too ripe now and then. They go to the compost pile. We do have composting here. We don't use the composting on our organic vegetable fields. We use it in other places. So all of the plant matter gets composted. We've tried to find ways to get it into charities, and it just doesn't work. It's too perishable. The charities don't want to take it.
Right.
And we find actually we have more success in helping people by, we have a program where we donate shares and our members buy shares, and we find families in need to give those shares to. And we match everything they buy. So if somebody buys a share for a needy family, we match one. So we serve two families that way. And the cool thing is they also get to be part of the community. Nobody knows who they are.
Right.
No one knows they didn't pay.
That's neat.
Yeah, so it's just a much better way than to try and find some outlet for the leftover stuff. It just doesn't really work.
That's such a great opportunity too. Like you say, it's anonymous, so that not only get the produce, but they get to be part of the community. Another question from David. He says, do you plant products on request if there is enough request, or do you stick with what you know works?
Oh, man, what a great question. So I've not had any requests that we weren't growing anyway. So I'll put it that way. We do grow things that are unusual that people are not used to. We have to get them used to them. Once they get used to them, we have about a 99.9% success rate of people loving them, right? So I'll give you an example. At our CSA, you will get garlic scapes, which is the flower stem of a hardneck garlic plant. We've got to cut that stem off to make the garlic grow a bulb. And that stem is awesome. It has the texture of asparagus, but it tastes like garlic. It's incredible. And you'll never get it anywhere but from a local farmer. And it only happens in June for about 2 weeks, and then it's over every year. And most of our new customers have never seen it before. It's kind of weird looking, and they don't know what to do with it. They try it, and they're asking in July and August and September, like, when do we get garlic scapes again? And tell them, well, next June you have to sign up again. We have a lot of different things like that. Kohlrabi is one. We grow fennel bulbs, which are unusual for people. You saw the purple potatoes. Like, people see those and they're not really sure how to handle that until you kind of explain to them what's going on, and try to think of what else. ACRE turnips, which we love. These salad turnips are just awesome.
My question is, you are not yet full-time, but you're on that trajectory. What are some major hurdles that really lie between where you're at now and going full-time, quitting your regular job?
Well, I'm quitting my regular job as of April 30, so I will be full-time. Yeah. Yeah, so the hurdles have generally been the golden cage, right? Where you just can't get out because it's, it's hard to imagine not having that paycheck at the end of the month. So I will be I will be retiring from my company here on April 30. And yeah, focusing on the farm.
Wow. That's so neat. All right.
Yeah.
Do you have any resources or mentors? Say somebody, is in Texas and they want to figure out how to do this in their local community. Any resources or mentors you would refer them to?
Absolutely. I will tell you, Connor Crickmore in upstate New York. Now he's growing in upstate New York, but his masterclass is unbelievable, and he goes through vegetable by vegetable, how to grow it, what kind of pests it might get, all kinds of stuff. He's a computer scientist turned farmer. So everything is very process oriented and very systematic. The other one, I mentioned him earlier, J.M. Fortier, the market gardener. He's the one that really, I would say, popularized this European market garden system with 30-inch beds, and he uses raised beds. We don't use raised beds, but he uses raised beds. But he will also, either of those guys, their masterclass will get you started from zero. In fact, the Market Gardener book itself can get you started from zero.
Perfect. Those are priceless. I'm going to plug a few more questions, guys. We've got 3 more minutes left. Talking with Rob Wegener, the Wegener Farm, THEWEGENER farm.com.
You got it.
Enough? Okay. All right. So gonna just pluck a couple more questions, guys. I'm sorry we could not get to all of them, but let's go ahead with this one. Do you use weed fabric?
Yes, I think that's a thing. We do. We use lots of it.
Everybody's congratulating you on retiring. That's the end of the live stream there. Everybody's just issuing their congratulations. All right, thank you so much. Where can people follow you? Do you have social media beyond your website?
So we do. We have a Facebook page. I'll confess I'm horrible at Instagram. I was going to offer, if anybody has questions that they'd still like to have answered, just hit the website at thewegenerfarm.com. We have a contact tab at the top. I'll have to warn you, if you contact me, you get on my mailing list, so you'll also start getting our newsletter at that point. You can unsubscribe, no problem, but I'd be happy to answer any other questions people might have.
All right, guys, that's an incredibly generous offer. I'm going to spell out the domain here so that you guys, whether you're listening in the replay or not, can get it. So the website is THEWEGENERFARM.com, thewegenerfarm.com. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Rob.
You're welcome. It was great.
Watch this video next for how one farmer earns $300,000 per year through his pasture-raised meat subscriptions.